Hi everybody, so I'm Ben. I'm a voice UI designer and a design strategist. I'll be honest with you, I don't have an overall thesis to talk to you about today, but I've got a bunch of talks. I'm just going to maybe make a judgment call based on your kind of experience. Who has designed a voice interface? Okay, alright, so we can... I've got some stuff that's kind of some fundamentals. So if somebody can just remind Tom to shut me the fuck up if I go on for too long. But anyway, let's get started. I want to give you a bit of something to think about. There is only one condition in which we can imagine managers not needing subordinates and masters not needing slaves. This condition would be that each instrument could do its own work at the word of command or by intelligent anticipation. Okay, put your hand up if you think that quote is 100 years old. 200. 500. 1,000. 2,000. More. Okay, maybe we have some classic scholars, I don't know. That was Aristotle. That wasn't clear. That was Aristotle. Okay. So the weird thing about this is just how long ago he was thinking about that. It kind of still blows my mind. Now, of course, he was thinking about the end of slavery. Pretty weird for a guy who was a slave owner himself. But it kind of seems like his dream of us talking to machines and commanding them was coming true. But again, contrast his thoughts, his lofty thoughts, with us trying to order a soy macchiato or something, right? There's something kind of delicious in what we're using it for at the moment. But anyway, so a little bit about me before I get started. I have been designing voice interfaces for a while. Thank you very much. My clients right now are Wall Street Journal, The Economist, doing lots of experimental stuff with them. My design methods that I've created for voice are used by the Beeb and Amazon. So I've just started to do a lot of training and speaking. Tomorrow, in fact, I'm doing my first session for O'Reilly. And I created this, the company I used to work for was really called Clear Left, really big into helping people learn and creating lots of interesting resources. And so I created this, when I started to learn voice, I realised it was quite hard to kind of collect all the thoughts together. There was too many resources all over the place. So I created this one place where you can go and read about all the principles as used by Google and Amazon, and we'll talk about a few of them later on, if we have time. Sorry, Tom, you're out of the room when I said this. Please just shut me the hell up if I go on for too long. So the question I get asked the most about voice is, how do we find our use case? So it's really kind of a product strategy question, but I will talk about it in relation to voice. And the reason I think it's so important is that I think somebody said there were what did Lauren call it? A lot of shitbots or something? Yeah, crackbots. Yeah, right. So there's a lot of dross on Amazon's skills store, right? I'm sure some of you know this already. And I want to tell you this, this one. I think it might be this lead here. Sorry. I want to tell you this story. There is an app, or a skill rather, that helps you reminds you to take your keys out of the house when you leave the house. You have to talk to it to get it to remind you to take your keys. Can anyone tell me the critical flaw in this logic? I wouldn't stop developers doing this kind of stuff. I really wouldn't. I love the fact that we can create and play. But it just seems to me like people aren't putting enough thought into what's useful with voice. Hands up, who's a designer? Not many, wow. It might be worth familiarising yourself with the idea of the double diamond of design. This is something they teach in design and art school. Hi, Noel. The thing is here that design school, they emphasize the understanding part of the diamond, right? So you go and you try to figure out all the things about the problem you're solving, and then you narrow down and you say, right, this is the problem I've chosen to solve. And I've spent time with my users and I've really figured out what it's all about. And then the second half is the build, right? Where you try lots of different things to solve that problem, and then you narrow down again on your one solution through testing. Now, how many organisations, or in fact individuals, have you worked for that go straight to the second half of this diamond? right? We've all done this, including me, right? So my argument is generate dozens and dozens of ideas about what use case you're actually tackling before you pick the one, right? I see too many organizations just going straight for, hey, that works in screen, bang, I'm going to do that in voice. Well, actually, just on screens as well, right? The boss has had some idea, some hippo has had some idea, and you just got to make it. No, don't do that. Anyway, David Lowe, who was one of the main evangelists at Amazon, he said, find your question. What is the question that you're trying to answer for your user? Start with just one in voice. Gary Vaynerchuk, I'll never say his name properly, he was asked, like, how could a small business like provide value through a voice interface, like through Alexa? And he basically just asked this really simple question. Do you feel like I think a massage therapist asked him this, and his response was, do you feel you can transfer knowledge through voice? Like, could you give somebody exercises to do every day, to this massage therapist? I'm like, yeah, even a small business can create value through the voice channel. I personally think there are kind of four lenses. There's, going and looking at what's happening in customer service, go and listen to what people are actually saying, what are the conversations they are having now. Then there's user research, right? What is the whole kind of journey? Let's have a look, let's map it out. What are all the different things that are people doing along the way? And then this is what's doing well in voice UI at the moment, which is brand and creative experiments. So like HBO do a voice skill for every big new season of show that comes along, and you can go and explore the world of Westworld or something, right? Or you can go and my kids play games through Alexa a lot. And then this other thing that I do a lot with organizations is I'm like, okay, well, what are the future behaviors? What are we not accounting for now that might be a future behavior because voice is possible? Quick tip, use something called the futures wheel to try this out. It's a really interesting exercise. So in terms of finding your use case, you can do some generative work, right? I'm going to just throw a few tools at you, really. And the first is kind of a classic, but nobody does enough of it, as I've just already mentioned, which is user research, right? Go and actually have conversations. It's kind of the stuff that people hate to do, right? Dirty humans, right? Why go mess with them? But actually, this is the most important work. And it's the thing that I most frequently bring to an organization when I want to help them design better. So I'm not going to talk about that, but here's just one of the things I do in training. Cha-ching, you can hire me. Let's say you want to figure out what some use cases are for voice, right? So what you do is you just list out some contexts, right? So lots of places along your week where you are doing stuff, right? So you're in the kitchen, you're ready to go to work, you're driving to a friend's house, okay. Now pick a load of subjects. This could be broad, this could be narrow. Just pick a load of subjects and make a big list on Post-its. Okay, and now you start to see, now I'm having loads of ideas for questions, like problems that I could solve for users. Okay, I've had 3 ideas, and now if I start swapping these around, those subjects, I start to generate even more ideas for things that we could solve for users. So here is, in the double diamond, that divergent part where you're going out, you're trying to have loads and loads of thoughts about all the problems that you could solve. Okay, there's a few generative ideas. So now let's talk evaluation. Like, how would you pick the one, right? Well, this is what they do at the BBC. They do a load of storyboarding. In fact, Amazon do a lot of this as well, right? So storyboarding, you don't have to be good at this kind of sketching or illustration. But what storyboarding does is it actually highlights a lot of the problems that you are starting to see in your use case. Oh, hang on, no, there might be 6 people in the room, and talking to Alexa in that context is rubbish, right? Or in the middle of a party here, and Alexa doesn't work, So you start to map out, and you start to see all these problems with the use case, and you can actually start throwing them away. This is a load of work. The BBC are heavily invested in voice, actually. They've got a lot of teams working on it. Cheryl Platts, she has worked on Cortana and Alexa. She has this kind of quick checklist, so things to consider when you're evaluating whether your use case works, like what is the scenario she's asking, so what other input methods might they have? Is it multimodal? Do they have a device? What's the environment? What's going on? As I mentioned, lots of other people. Multitasking, are they doing many things at once? That's a really good use case for voice. LEDs, screen behaviors, is it going to get interrupted? Voice is really crap at that right now. Now, I'm not going to go through these, but I do have a mega list of questions. I'll make a slide available, don't worry. But basically, I'll just point out the last. This is the sort of a variation of the 5 whys. But the last one I'll point out, and it's sort of the central question that I keep coming back to, and it's from Kathy Sierra. I don't know if anybody's read her book, Making Users Badass. But her whole thesis is we focus on products Completely wrong, right? We focus on what the product can do. What we should actually be thinking about is how do products turn people into superheroes, right? How do we give them wings? And I remember that moment when I first got my Alexa and hooked it up to Spotify. That was magical. That was a superpower that I could ask for any music on demand. I still feel the magic, and even though I do it mostly every day. So that is the question to ask that I would throw at you. Like, how does the thing you're making in voice turn them into a superhero? Slightly more tactical. Web Credible have this big checklist that you can use. There's a URL there. There's an organisation in Holland, Craftwork, they sort of have this conversational canvas. If you are very business oriented about what you're producing, I will add, I don't think you should be very business oriented right now for a voice app. I think it's a bit too early for most people, most organisations. Tom's an interesting exception though. But yeah, you can make money, don't get me wrong, but actually the goal right now is really to be learning. If you work in a larger organisation, your organisation should be learning how to build and exploit voice, not necessarily making money from it right now. One thing about the use case, stop me if I'm going too fast here, frequency of use is everything right now. Okay, I just put a flaming bus up because a bus is useless if it doesn't come often, right? Same is true with voice. If your users forget to use it, if it doesn't encourage a habit, they're probably going to forget that it's even that those capabilities are even there. So that was a mega blast in 10 minutes of about how I sort of think about use cases. I do a lot more detailed work in workshops, but I've just kind of given you the basics. Okay, let's talk, as many of you haven't actually designed a voice interface, I'll kind of talk about some of the core principles. Excuse me while I sit. Alright, so, being brief, number one. Okay, let's talk about why that's important. Now here's where we got some sound. Alright, hopefully this will work. Alexa, how many calories are in a banana?
There are varieties of bananas. For example, raw bananas contain 89 calories per 100 grams, 25 calories per ounce, and dehydrated bananas have 346 calories per 100 grams, 98 calories per ounce. A typical value is 346 calories per 100 grams, 98 calories per ounce. For example, for dehydrated bananas or banana powder.
Okay, thanks Alexa. I was just thinking of eating a banana. That was it, really. Okay, let's have another example. Google, how many calories are there in a banana?
There are 89 calories in 100 grams of banana.
Oh, okay. So, alright, there we go. I think Google's like making me think a lot about what 100 grams of banana is, but I just wanted to know how many calories are in a banana. There you go, right? So there's too long and too short. And what I talk about a lot is like the idea of a Goldilocks zone. What is too much, what is too little? Default to less, because it's a voice interface, it's a low bandwidth medium, but actually, you've got to find the right level of detail. So don't overwhelm your user. Amazon had this idea of the one breath test. You can take a picture of this in a moment when I've done the whole list. Try to find your Goldilocks zone. And then the really good one is put the actionable information, the new stuff, at the end of the sentence, not at the beginning. And a really important thing is to read it out loud, right? Don't just write it, because the way we write is different to the way we speak. So you must read out the scripts. Okay, moving on. Sorry, I don't give you a whole lot of time there. Progressive disclosure. Okay, what's this all about? Okay. Hey Google, are there any restaurants nearby?
I found a few places within 0.2 miles. The first one is Sukhothai Palace at 62 Middle Street in Brighton. The second one is Coach House at 59 Middle Street in Brighton. The third one is Food for Friends at Food for Friends, 17 to 18 Prince Albert Street in Brighton.
Okay, who knows anything about those restaurants? Nothing. Where they are, maybe, if you know the street names. Okay, thanks Google. So Google reads 3 lengthy options and then stops. Yeah, surprising actually. Google usually better at this kind of thing. Okay, let's hear another one. Hey Siri, are there any restaurants near me?
One option I found is Oh My, a Japanese restaurant on Boundary Road in Hove, which averages 5 stars. Do you want that one?
Tell me about another one. Okay, I won't play anymore. But you hear what happened there, right? Siri breaks up everything that she offers you and gives you better information about how you'd make your choice, like the star ratings, what kind of restaurant it is. I can't believe Google didn't even tell me what kind of restaurants these were. Really weird. Okay, so you can see progressive disclosure is where you actually take the time to break up the options, because basically giving people a long list of options in voice is like when a waiter tells you all the specials, and by the time they get to the end, you've forgotten what they said at the beginning. There you go. Okay, so actually I'm going to skip this one. Sorry, this is not actually that useful. But there, actually, I'll just mention there is this concept called directed dialogue, where if you say things like "which would you like," you'll actually get better responses rather than the open-ended one, which is on the left. Anyway, so let's summarise progressive disclosure. Reduce the reliance on memory. Minimise the use of lists, present only the options necessary to complete a task at any one time, break up requests for information, and then, as you saw in the last one, direct the user to the desired answer where required, right? So if you want them to choose one of two things only, then you can write the question in such a way that they will only give you that answer and not, Orangina instead of Coke and Pepsi. All right, let's talk about being cooperative. So, for anyone who's interested, and you should all be interested because you're writing bots, there is a concept in linguistics. In the early 70s, Paul Grice, English linguist, he came up with these maxims. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but he said basically, people come into every conversation with a few fundamental assumptions about what the other person is going to do. So the maxim of quantity, no more than is needed. Quality, you'll be honest and you know what you're talking about with evidence. Manner, you'll be clear and polite. And relation, you will help me with the task at hand. When you ask for a coffee, they don't automatically tell you where the toilets are in Starbucks. That's a dumb example, but they stay on topic. You'd be surprised the number of bots that don't stay on topic. So let's hear an example of this in voice world. I'm just going to focus on one, which is the cooperative bit. Alexa, what's the score of the Brazil-Mexico game?
Currently, Brazil are leading against Mexico 1-0.
Okay. Thanks, Alexa. Just the facts there. So unfortunately I don't have an audio example because I'm not in the US for this one. I tried really, really hard to get this, but I know Alexa does this. So, actually I can't read it on my screen. Here's the tweet. I ask Alexa for a score of the Capitals game, as a hockey team. She tells me score and asks me if I want to listen to the live stream. Me, yes. Do I want to enable a skill? Yes. Stream starts, mind blown. Woo! Right? So Alexa made a guess about what the person would actually want to do next if they like what they heard in the score, right? And not enough people are thinking about the what next. You've got to be judicious with it. It's got to be a high value what next, what you offer people. But you can see that the answer on the left, actually, that we could have more, right? I want to listen to the game on the radio. Perfect. So let's just summarize this. Ask yourself what a human would do. In this situation, oh, you order a burger, would you like fries with that? I didn't ask for fries, but that's the natural next step, right? Anticipate the follow-up needs. Don't ask rhetorical questions. Always make that next step clear, but make sure you stay on topic. And as I mentioned, stick to high-value follow-ups. That's a really, really important step. Okay, let's move on to something called considerate confirmation. I'm at 18 minutes. Is that all right, Tom? All right. Okay, so confirmation. Now, have a think about conversations you have. I bet most of you have not listened to them really carefully like a linguist would and broken them down as to actually what's happening. So, through body language and noises, these weird things called disfluencies. Yes, yep. All these noises that we make when we converse, actually we're giving the other person an awful lot of confirmation as we speak. People really, really expect it. So a bad voice experience is one where it just confirms nothing back to the user. So I actually build in a lot of artificial confirmation. Even if I don't need to explicitly confirm something, I will often just make it feel like the affirmation and the confirmation is there. So have a listen to this one. Sophie is my wife.
Send a message to Sophia Passmore.
What
say?
Welcome home, honey.
Ready to send it?
Yep.
It's sent.
Okay, so there it is. Anything missing from the confirmation?
Repeating the message back to you.
Right, there we go. Trick question. This was actually done on desktop, so I was looking at the message. So Siri didn't need to confirm because Siri knew that I was actually looking at the message. So let's have a look at that on the phone. Hey Siri, send a message to Sophia Passmore.
What do you want to say?
Welcome home, honey.
Your message to Sophia Passmore says, welcome home, honey. Ready to send it?
Yep.
Done.
Alright, yeah, so fairly obvious, I probably didn't need to play that one, but right, like, in the context where you have your headphones in, and like, I do this riding my bike on the seafront, I do a lot of this kind of thing, so I'm not going to look at anything, and Siri knows that, so I need the extra confirmation to be sure. And there's lots and lots of different ways in which you can do confirmation. Just an example from SF, like, if there are two AMC theatres, that's a chain of cinemas, if, for example, like there's an equal distance between the two, you actually might need to confirm because the system doesn't have full confidence. So, okay, this is a way to do that. Then there's implicit confirmation, right? So what you do is to confirm the information the user has given to you, you repeat it back to them, but you sneak it into the next question. So that's what we call implicit confirmation. And then sometimes there's none. The lights switch on. Do I really need to be told? Actually, you know what? Alexa does tell me, I'm now turning the lights on in the kitchen. Yeah, I can see that. I can guess why they do it, right? Like, maybe it's because you know, you've got loads of lights around the house and they're not exactly sure where you are when you're doing it, right? Okay, fair enough. But actually, sometimes you don't really need to confirm. So, consider a confirmation. Let's say we acknowledge what the user has said most of the time, which allows them to correct errors. You've got to consider the context and the mode because sometimes that changes how confirmation is done. Don't over-confirm, it can be really effing annoying. And you can use implicit confirmation or group your confirmation. So sometimes I'll only confirm all the information at the end. Not always, but sometimes. Right, we're at 21 minutes. I keep going here. Is that alright? Okay, fail gracefully. I think this is the last one. So the main thing you need to worry about in voice is that spend more time on errors than on your happy path. Because voice is the most error-prone mode of input. I sometimes like to joke, a Glaswegian accent never broke my trackpad, right? Like, other modes of input just work, no matter what the audio or the accent environment, you know, what the person's accent is, right? So it's so error-prone to the environment, you know, it's physics, right? So you've got to spend much more time, like if a user doesn't speak and so on, or if there's crosstalk, which apparently is the norm in family environments. So let's have a look at some ways. Hey Siri, send a message to Sophia Passmore.
What do you want to say? What do you want to say? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
So yeah, thanks Siri. Repeating the error messages really works. No. Okay, so if I were to rewrite that, I'd probably do something like this. What do you want to say? Oh, I didn't catch that. What do you want the message to say? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, right? So you escalate. The idea is that you escalate the errors. And in fact, I'll talk a bit more about this. Just this example here, right? So in a minute, I'll give you a quick demo of a meeting recorder use case, right? So imagine that Alexa can suddenly record your meetings at work and you can play them back later. So let's just look at this dialogue a bit. So record this meeting. How long is your meeting? Until lunchtime. That's a bit ambiguous. What does until lunchtime mean? Okay, just checking. Is that until 1 p.m? And then the user says, and then the system might say, how long should I record for in hours, right? So that's what we call the directed dialogue again. We're steering the user back to a very specific piece of desired input because we're not going to capture things like lunchtime, which is ambiguous anymore. So you need to spend, this is a huge topic, but there's a lot to do here. You can do graceful failure to the point where the user doesn't even realise there's been a failure. You can kind of put them back on track and do all sorts of clever shit. But anyway, let's summarise failing gracefully. Avoid errors by framing the expected answer. So I'm not a big fan of like, you can say blur to blur, but you can gracefully direct people to say the desired input. Avoid the repetition. That's a really, really horrible thing, as you saw with Siri. The things you kind of need to deal with are no responses, unexpected input like off the beaten track, ambiguous, like maybe they didn't give enough, or sometimes even more information than requested. So I'm doing a lot of NLP work with a team at the moment where the users are giving, you ask a question and they carry on the story. So we have to figure out, well, what does that mean for later questions and so on. Okay. Oh God, I'm at 25 minutes. Tom, stop me. I'm gonna just do this one really quickly. Here's the thing. Your system should help because voice skills. Sorry, I'm stepping on plugs. Because voice skills is very hard for a user to sense what is possible and also what is not possible. You should be constantly thinking about how to manage expectations, right? So here, welcome to Meeting Recorder, what can I do for you? Yeah, thanks. Welcome to Meeting Recorder, you can ask me to record, play, or list recent recordings. Right, so maybe those are the 3 principal use cases in the Meeting Recorder. Not too long, and doesn't feel like a menu, but you've stated what it can do, you know. So that's kind of a reasonably concise way of telling the user, right? So communicate what's possible, and if needed, what's not. You need to think about the help state, the start over state. Also consider repeat use. Can you reduce the amount of information that you give people? I will show you an example of that, which you should all play. I'm going to just plug it a little bit. This is the first Alexa-powered board game. It's called When in Rome, made by Sensible Objects here in London. I think Amazon gave them like $2 million to make this. How cool is that? But yeah, basically the instructions for the game are quite explicit the first time you use it, but as time goes on, it realises that players don't need that. Talk to me in the pub about this because it's kind of an interesting thing. All right. Yeah, voice principles I've covered already. I do super fun day-long workshops if you're interested. Super, super, super fun. Much more fun than prototyping, for example, screen GUIs, and you'll learn a lot. So let's talk about, very briefly, Wizard of Oz testing. And I'm going to skip the talk bit and just show it to you. Who knows what I'm talking about, Wizard of Oz testing? Just a couple. Okay, this will be useful. Do we have a second mic?
Yeah.
All right. Can somebody give me an empty beer bottle? Thank you, Martin. I also need a volunteer. Real quick. Come on, you brave lot. It's really painless. Thank you, Niels. Round of applause for Niels. Okay, so I'm going to ask you not to look at the screen while everybody else does. So Wizard of Oz testing was a process developed in the 1970s at Johns Hopkins University, where essentially what they realised was it's better to fake the interface before you build it, much more efficient. You could spend a lot of time coding something and actually not get very far with how it should be designed. So the idea is that through Wizard of Oz testing, you can iterate your way to, I don't know why my display, sorry, I need to grab that onto this screen. There's got to be a better shortcut for this. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Right, I'm almost there. So what you do, here we go. Can you all see this now? Yes? All right, cool. Niels, would you mind standing up?
Yep.
So what you are looking at on the right-hand side of the screen comes from a text file. This is a tool I created with a friend of mine from Google, Abby Jones. And basically what it does is it takes a text file full of your lines and it maps them to the keyboard. So I'm going to be the wizard right now, and Niels is going to interact with the beer bottle pretending it's Alexa, and I'm going to push the keyboard to cue the responses. Okay, so Niels, I'm going to give you a scenario now, and you just talk to Alexa any way you think is appropriate, okay? So you're at work, you've got a meeting for an hour, and you'd like to capture the audio to listen back to it later. Ask Alexa to do this.
Alexa, capture audio for the next hour. Recording started for 1 hour. Who would you like me to send the recording to?
Yes. Now, it wasn't perfect, but here's the thing. The responses you're reading in this text file, this is a made-up scenario. It's not exactly the perfect way to design this scenario, but the point is the responses that you read here are not the first ones that I wrote. It was only by doing these tests and changing the text file each time around one of the tests did I figure out how the dialogue needed to go. And it's because there are tools that do this already, but my thing was like, how can I do this even faster? Like if I can run it off a text file, I can like get people in for 5 minutes, test, and then swap one over, I can do it at work really, really, really fast. So as much as this seems like rushed, it's really useful at some stages in your design process to do like super rapid prototyping. I'm just going to leave you with one thought. I don't know how I'm doing for time. But this is Mark Weiser, and he's really the father of kind of ubiquitous computing. Right, this idea that the future of computing will just disappear. We won't be sort of have our attention captured by screens anymore. And he said, yeah, the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. And that to me speaks to both the ancient nature of voice. We don't think of our voice communication as a tool, but it is one. There was a time when we didn't have it. And also to the future of this, where actually computing will be utterly seamless through our voices. Thank you very much.